Hey folks, this video is the first part of a two-part story by Ross Tyson, also known as Googly Eyes. He's got a book coming out soon called When Reality Tears. It's available now for pre-order, so make sure you go support him. Links will be below. I miss the old days. Used to, it always seemed like there was this sense of wonder about the world. When you could hear a story secondhand from someone and not know if it was true or not. Or watch late night television and see an old grainy camcorder video and think to yourself, damn, that could really be out there. Those times are gone though. And as easy as it should be to capture all kinds of weird stuff on video, considering we have 4K cameras in our pockets at all times, you end up seeing a lot less of the stuff that used to stoke that little fire of wonder. Seems strange though, doesn't it? Like everyone has a phone now, we can record anything that happens at a moment's notice, more connected than ever before. The moment someone does something embarrassing in the middle of nowhere, America, everyone in the world knows about it, from Brazil to Japan, to some jackass preppers out in the deserts. It's hard to keep stuff quiet anymore. So why the hell aren't there videos of Mothman and Sasquatch all over TikTok and Twitter? Because I and others have done our jobs right. That's why. It's been a hell of a task too. Definitely not easy by any means. A lot of good people have been lost along the way, and it's in their memory that I'm making these records public. See, the organization I work for has decided that all of this is a lost cause. But I don't think it should be dismissed that easily. We went through hell on earth to nap some of these creatures, and some of them honestly aren't that bad. Just animals trying to survive, like you and me here on Earth. We did this under the belief that we were giving them safety, helping them live away from the humans encroaching on their habitat. But now, they're on their own up here. God knows some of them can't coexist. But avarice sees fit to just abandon the job that they started, along with all of us up here trying to salvage some sort of normalcy for these poor things. Okay, probably best to run things back and start from the beginning. Don't know why I'm presenting this like you'll know what the hell is going on. Hell, there's a lot the average person has not a damn clue about that goes on right under their own noses. If half of you knew about the stuff going on in the world, well, you'd probably just walk into the ocean and never return rather than take your chances with these things. These aren't the ravings of some madman. Although it's going to sound like your conspiracy theory-addled uncle going off over Thanksgiving dinner. Everything that I'm going to mention here is real, verifiable, and I have other eyewitness accounts to back me up. The Avarice Corporation is covering up a lot of this, but trust me, they're going to face their due here eventually if I can have my way. Those C-suite bastards raking in dividend checks are in for a rude awakening soon. Sorry. I'm off on tangents again. I don't know how long I'll have up here, or when this message will reach back to Earth. I've attached a few of my own case files to back up our findings, as well as some advice on how to deal with most of the subjects I'll be discussing. In short, cryptids. Those spooky creatures you hear in legends, the ones that get all kinds of crackpot specials on History Channel in the last decade, are real. I know, right? Why would they let the History Channel and every other dumbass on reality television talk about them if they were actually real? Wouldn't that endanger them or make people riot if they found out? Of course fucking not. Why do you think they do that and invite the craziest looking motherfuckers around to talk about Bigfoot wrecking their campsite or Nessie stealing their lunch? They know it's going to desensitize everyone, get less people to take it seriously, and make any of the real incidents that happen because of the cryptids much easier to cover up. It's a classic example of flooding the zone with shit to cover up the truth, and goddamn it's worked really fucking well. Yours truly was one of the ones behind all that too, as much as I hate to admit it. I've done my share of screwing with the people of Earth for a nice paycheck, and I'm telling all this now to try and set it right. Let's get back to the start, 1967. If you keep up with any kind of cryptid history, you might recognize that year as important. Some assholes camping out in California captured Bigfoot on video, and from there a whole lot of madness took hold. Less than a minute of footage, grainy as all hell, and people went wild. started pouring out into the area, camping out in the woods, trying to track down the damn Sasquatch for themselves. Everyone believed they were going to be the first ones to back the Musquatch, and a lot of people either died or went missing. See, it turns out that Squatches are very territorial creatures. That one they captured on video was massive. But here's the thing, it was a juvenile. As they get older, they get more reclusive, don't appear nearly as much during the daylight. All I can guess is that little one got the urge to find a little snack during the day or needed to run off and use the bathroom, and just so happened to walk by a couple of campers with a camera that were able to capture him. The poor thing didn't mean much by it, and it's not his fault for all the chaos that came afterward. You ever hear about the Bluff Creek Campfire Massacre of 1967? No? Good, because you shouldn't have. Our company did a lot of work covering that up. And if we hadn't, someone might have burned down that entire forest. Right near the same place where that original film was taken, only a few weeks after it was released to the public, a bunch of Bigfoot hunters got together to combine forces. They were all camping out on a Wednesday night, drinking, partying, and being general nuisances in the forest. It ended up being the last night on Earth for some of them. From the eyewitness accounts we have, one of them started firing off his gun a little bit before midnight, just shooting it off into the trees. Now that's already a massive safety issue as is, because you have no idea who could be out there minding their own business. This guy though, drunk as a damn skunk, decided he was going to have a little target practice with nothing while screaming at whatever Sasquatch may be listening that he would mount its head on his wall and make it suck his dick. Yeah, Bigfoot hunters aren't the most stable people around in the first place, but this guy was something. To make a long story short, a couple of hours after that, most of the campsite had turned in. Some say they heard the screams first. Others say that they smelled a foul odor suddenly permeate the air. But everyone very quickly got lost in all the chaos. The alpha of the Bigfoot pack that was living out in those woods started grabbing people left and right out of tents and just ripping them apart with his bare hands. I mean entire limbs, bone and all, just torn off like they were toothpicks broken after one use. It chewed some of them as it went, I think in a tactic to scare some of the hunters off and sort of assert dominance. But it made sure to find the guy that had been yelling and shooting off into the forest. He was, well, his body wasn't really recognizable when they found him the next morning. His head had been pulled off his shoulders by force, entire spinal cord coming out with it, before it was smashed into a tree so hard it stayed there. The Sasquatch basically took his promise of mounting his head and turned it back on him. Just didn't follow up on the second part, thankfully. From there, we stepped in. There's this company called Avarice. Maybe you've heard of them, though probably by a different name. They're not really interested in being in the public eye thanks to their more shady business practices, which is coincidentally why I'm writing all of this right now. They came forward to the government and basically said, "Hey, there are a lot of weird creatures running around the country, and they can be dangerous. You don't want word of them getting out. Let us handle it." And here we are. They sure shit handled it alright. Sent in a hunting team that I was a part of, though it was one of my first jobs with the company, and we rounded up all the Sasquatch we could find in the forests of California, put them all under sedation, then brought them back to base camp in the middle of the Midwest. They built a sort of conservation sanctuary for them, set up a bunch of land where they could just roam and be themselves without having to worry about humans impending. It worked well for a while, and they built up a pretty big base alongside it that we used as sort of a requisition facility, with myself and others going on more missions to procure various cryptids across the United States in order to keep people safe. I'll talk more about those later though. The biggest development that happened from this is that, eventually, we outgrew this base of operations. Thanks to some prodding from myself and other procurement specialists as well, we lobbied the board at Avarice to allow an even greater reserve. When we were pushing for it, we fully expected them to get like a deserted island or a small country somewhere. Cue our surprise when Avarice reveals to us that they've been setting up somewhere even more grand. An entire fucking planet. Look, I don't know how many different pies Avarice has their fingers in, but apparently they've been on the whole mission of terraforming Mars for way longer than any of us here on Earth have been pushing for. Like, they've got the place maybe 50% habitable for humans and general life at this point in time. When they first sprung the idea of going up there back in the late 80s, it was only about 25%, so they have made huge strides in the time since. Long story short, they set up a massive holding facility for cryptids up on the rat planet, away from anyone they could endanger here on Earth, or anyone that might endanger them. This happened all the way back in the 90s too, when they started moving everyone up. And since then, the conservatory up there has only grown in size exponentially. There are over 70 different types of cryptids up there, some that were discovered by Everest themselves and kept quiet from the main human populace. I ended up going to work there around 1999, after putting in plenty of years procuring the creatures that would end up living there. To fully understand what's happening there now, I'm going to have to go back and forth in history a bit and explain how much of a pain in the ass it was to even capture them in the first place. So bear with me here, and I'm sorry if I go off on tangents. The Sasquatch was my first hunt. I was young, fresh out of college, and was working in wildlife conservation as a career. Started out going between national parks out on the west coast, basically doing check-ins on the wildlife, making sure that there were no invasive species being brought in, coming up with ways that the parks system could continue to thrive and let humans come in to see the natural beauty of our country while also not being bothers to the local wildlife, stuff like that. An avarice recruiter approached me with this new initiative, said they were looking into conservation for what they called endangered species. At the time, I was young and idealistic, thought I could make a difference for some well-known animals that weren't doing so hot out in the wild. I had vaguely seen the Bigfoot video when it got some airtime on the news a few weeks prior, but needless to say, I didn't really believe it was real. Sure, there had been legends of the Sasquatch around the area for over a century at that point, even an old photo dating back to the turn of the century, though nobody really took it seriously. I nearly walked out of the first meeting we had when I was told that the Sasquatch would be the first animal we were trying to procure for conservation. I thought I had been hired by a bunch of damn whack jobs with not a damn clue about what happens in real wildlife protection work. For a minute, I even thought I had accidentally walked into the wrong room at the hotel we stationed the base camp at. Maybe I had stumbled onto one of those weirdo UFO conventions or something. Took maybe 30 minutes for the lead researcher, a guy named Jerry, to convince me to hear out what he has to say and get me to come back in. Turns out, they had a lot of evidence, mostly pictures taken from the campfire massacre. I've gotta say, I've always been a fan of scary movies, especially the more independent, gory stuff. Saw Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast in a small art theater not long after it came out in '63. These pictures were something that Lewis could only hope to achieve with special effects and an unlimited budget. My mind was changed almost immediately. People ripped apart, puddles of blood scattered around the campsite. It was nasty. There was one photo that stood out though. Someone had gotten their camera out and managed to get a picture during the massacre itself. They found the person who took it the next morning, entire midsection ripped out and camera still in their hands, flash bulb shattered. It's a damn miracle they were able to develop the footage. There in the darkness stood the alpha Sasquatch. One hand was holding a disembodied human leg, the other was grabbing a screaming camper by the head and in the process of tearing it right off the body. Even through the grainy photograph, you could see the skin on the lower neck beginning to tear, tendons popping out as blood spurted, frozen in time on cheap celluloid. The Sasquatch had blood matted over every inch of its fur, hairy as hell get out, completely naked, massive genitals swinging in the wind as it went on a rampage. The flash must have caught it off guard because it reflected in its eyes, massive, glowing green from the bright light, fangs bared in a hideous snarl. I can only assume that made the photographer the immediate target on its list. From there, I was sold. I knew that getting these things to a conservatory wasn't only the best way to protect them, but to protect everyone. We set out during the day. It was early October, so the air was just starting to get cool, leaves beginning to change, and a light breeze that made things feel a little bit more scary than it already was. After a few hours, we picked up a trail, found some tracks and droppings that definitely didn't fit the profile for any kind of animal I knew of already. Judging by the freshness of the markings, we were maybe 2 or 3 hours behind them, so we kept moving at a pretty steady pace, not trying to catch up too fast, but also not trying to fall behind. The hunters we had with us were damn good at what they did. Kept a keen eye out for any new tracks, scratch marks on nearby trees, and at one point we even found a deer carcass they had fed on. Poor thing looked like they had just snatched it right up off the ground and swung it against the tree by the antlers, breaking its neck immediately before they tore into it. Limbs had been ripped off, and they were able to profile at least 4 different bite patterns, leading us to believe we were on the trail of the entire pack. Around 5 in the evening, we decided to stop tracking, with the hunters finding new droppings that indicated we were maybe an hour behind the pack. Now we hit the moment of truth. Time to set the trap. We put out the bait, a goat that we had been trailing with us all afternoon. Figured it was loud enough to attract anything within a couple of miles in the forest. One of the hunters made a small cut on the goat's chest in order to draw blood, hoping that it would be enough to bring out the pack for a nice easy meal. Look, I'm not really for using live bait personally, but when you're hunting this dangerous of a creature, gotta do what you gotta do, you know. Can't say I didn't feel bad for the poor goat though. Poor thing must have known what it was being used for, because as soon as they tied it up to a tree, it started screaming its head off. We retreated further into the woods, close enough that we could keep an eye on it through binoculars and hit it with tranquilizer rifles, but far enough downwind that our scent hopefully wouldn't alert the pack to something more. We had tree stands and hammocks set up all along the trees, taking every measure we could just to not let them know that we were here. Thanks to Avarice bankrolling everything, we had some of the top-of-the-line equipment available at the time too. Early night vision optics to let us see even in the intense darkness of the forest, motion trackers that would alert us when something got within 500 feet of our camp. Anything we could really need to not become the hunted despite what we were going up against. A little after sundown, they showed up. The goat still hadn't stopped screaming for the past few hours, and I guess one of them finally got too curious. They approached quietly as we all watched through our scopes, keeping an eye on every movement, every possible action that this thing could make, while also trying to stay aware of our surroundings and make sure that the others weren't sneaking up on us as we observed. It was one of the smaller ones that went up to it first, giving the goat a poke and hearing it scream in terror as it finally caught sight of the soon-to-be diners in the darkness. After realizing that it was something that he could potentially eat, it grabbed the goat, holding it under the chest and looking it up and down like it was deciding the best course of action. One hand touched the horns, squeezing them while making little grunting noises. The others gathered around, observing what was happening as they tried to decide on who got first dibs. After a few moments, the largest of them snatched the screaming creature from the smaller one, and with only one arm, swung it hard against a nearby rock, cracking the goat's head open as the screaming stopped. After a few minutes, all 5 of them were passing the goat carcass back and forth, devouring it with huge, vicious bites one after another. They began passing it around, each taking a bite off of the torso and chewing it for a moment, before giving grunts of satisfaction. I saw one of the other hunters give a sign that it was time, giving a signal for a countdown. As soon as he finished, 10 different hunters let loose, firing off a mix that would tranquilize a herd of elephants on their own. Each one hit a mark too, though I think the Sasquatch pack only thought they were just bugs trying to sting them. One of them swatted at the air, trying to shoot the darts away. And within only seconds, they were all down. Of course, that was going to be way too easy for taking out a pack of Sasquatch. The procurement team moved in as the rest of us stayed back, keeping an eye on things while the hunters reloaded in case they needed another couple of hits. Procurement managed to get the restraints on the entire pack and called in the chopper that was going to lift them out to where an armored truck was waiting to move them the rest of the way. What we didn't account for was a 6th Sasquatch that had been straggling behind the pack. Maybe it was a safety measure they took, born from years of avoiding human contact and making sure that they didn't all get taken out at once. But all of a sudden, there was chaos on sight. A Sasquatch that was around 10 feet tall came running in, swinging one arm wildly and sending one of the procurement team flying into a tree. The poor guy hit hard enough that it immediately snapped his back, bending him backwards around the tree, dead. Another member tried to run, but was grabbed with one big hand wrapping around his skull. The Squatch gave a quick squeeze, crushing the hapless man in his grasp immediately. You ever seen a bunch of rubber bands crush a watermelon? I can't without thinking of that poor bastard. That was one of the first times I ever truly felt in danger out in nature. I've always been pretty reverent of the wilderness, making sure to leave things as I found them, acting like a guest instead of someone who belonged, basically always trusting my gut instead of putting myself into any kind of situations where bad things could end up happening. Here though, all that shit went right out the window. As long as those things were out there in the woods, none of us were safe, and we had pissed it the hell off. Thank fuck we had those hunters set up in case more of them showed up. I mean, it seems like common sense in hindsight, since we had no idea just how many we were dealing with. But looking back, we had no idea just how easily all of us could have been slaughtered right there on the spot, just like the campfire massacre. Those hunters hit their mark, all 10 of them, and this damn thing fell like a prize fighter that just took one of the meanest right hooks you've ever seen. I don't think any of us stopped holding our breath until every single one was restrained and airlifted out of there. We went back to the hotel that night with what should have been a sense of accomplishment. But carelessness ensured that, instead, we felt remorse and grief, seeing exactly what these creatures could do to our friends. The men that died still come to my mind every so often when I'm doing observation work on the Sasquatches up here. Like I said, we took them to the main conservation area in the Midwest United States, and they stayed there for a good 20 years or so. Then we moved them up here, to Mars, using some teleportation tech that Everest developed back in the 50s. At the time, they told us it was developed by good, homegrown Americans, but in recent years, after they abandoned us up here, I've come to learn that was a lie. All those Nazi scientists that disappeared after the war, Everest scooped the bastards up and gave them full benefits, a damn good salary, and pension. Fucking figures. Up here, we've got a good 400 acres on the Red Planet that's dedicated Squatch land now. The same 6 we had captured that night are all here, along with 4 others that were picked up from throughout the US in the years since, and 5 that were actually born right here on Mars. Studying them has been fascinating, and while they're absolutely not friendly to humans, we've been able to monitor them with cameras and got a pretty deep insight into how they function. To be honest, they're not much different than us. They value a family dynamic, and although their lifespans are much longer than us, we're guessing they live to about 100 to 150 years. They seem to mate for life. Gotta say, despite seeing the alpha rip people apart, seeing it run around the forests up here with a Squatch cup on its shoulders is strangely heartwarming. Of course, we have a livestock breeding program up here that keeps them fed and happy, so they don't want for anything, for now at least. Considering what happened though, we don't know how long our facilities and resources are going to last in the future. All things considered, even seeing the carnage and the terror that the Sasquatch can bring, it was somehow one of the least dangerous hunts I've been on. Jesus, what time is it? I've been reminiscing for so long, I totally lost track of the hour. Up here, the sun is going down, and I'm going to be on shift soon. See, even with Everest abandoning us up here, we're still trying to operate as normal, not only for our own sanity, but for the sake of all the creatures up here as well. Hell, it's not their fault we snatched them away from their home planet and dropped them up here on Mars. So, I'm going to do my rounds. Might visit with the Fresno nightcrawlers for a bit and check in on them. Those things, they're all legs when you come across them at night. They can honestly look terrifying. But they're basically giant puppies. Super friendly, love to play tag and just hang out. Good little dudes. Anyway, I'll update with more of my missions later. Then maybe you'll understand how this whole mess happened once I explain it. Talk about an eventful night. Around 3 in the morning, I ended up getting a call from Paul, one of the other guards up here, that one of the assets got loose from his containment. You would think 100 acres and an electrified aviary cage there wouldn't be much room for anything to get out. But this son of a bitch is crafty as hell, and it's more than likely he's been planning for this for quite some time. Of all the places I've been to, the Pine Barrens of New Jersey might be my least favorite, though a lot of it is thanks to this bastard and the part he played in my time there. The old Jersey Devil certainly lives up to his name, I'll tell you that. It was 1979. I had over 10 years with Everest Corporation under my belt at the time, and to be honest, it wasn't too bad. Then again, I had no idea exactly what these bastards were doing all this time back then. And when you consider the damn good paycheck and benefits package, I didn't think too much if I did hear about anything sketchy. I was in my 30s, getting to travel around the entire country while doing conservation work, and dare I say, a bit of a playboy considering how many cities I got to visit then never come back to. God knows how many women I charmed and left hanging back in the day before it was easy to track people down on the internet. Now, stories about the Jersey Devil have been circulating for over 2 centuries at this point. If you're at all interested in these creatures, or just know a bit of Jersey history, you probably heard the story at some time or another. Back in the early 1700s, a woman named Mama Leeds was pregnant with her 13th child. God knows why you'd want 13 little bastards running around back in those days, but hey, guess she found out the hard way why you shouldn't have that many. Supposedly, this baby came flying out of her cooch as a full-blown demon, screeching, leathery wings, sharp fangs, and a face that, as it turned out, not even a mother could love. Since then, it's terrorized the Jersey Pine Barrens, flying over and scaring the shit out of campers late at night. Disappearances happened throughout the years, though never with much frequency that it became a problem. Until Everest had something to say about it, I suppose. We got orders in March of that year to head out to New Jersey, and I gotta tell you, it was not what I wanted to do. When we got there, the local Everest rep gave us the rundown. 10 missing persons cases in the Pine Barrens, 6 cold cases that were billed as mafia murders where a body had been found. Except those bodies that were found were definitely not killed by anything human. They took us to see the coroner to get an idea of what we might be dealing with, and they showed us the latest one they had found. Needless to say, it was, well, stomach-turning is an understatement. This poor girl was in her early 20s. They think she was a vagrant, couldn't find any form of ID or get a hold of any kind of family. DNA testing wasn't such a big thing yet, so it's not like they had anything to match her to in a database. Dental records didn't pull much up either. Word was that she was homeless, camping out in the pines with another woman who she was traveling with. Last she had been seen, the other woman had said she left their shared tent to go use the bathroom around midnight 3 weeks before. Apparently, she was gone for about 10 minutes when she heard a scream. Then, she never came back. Girl reported it to the police the next day when she never saw her again. But they did a whole load of nothing, as per usual when drifters ended up going missing. Well, a few weeks later, and her body gets found by a couple of hikers that were walking through the pines. It was apparently pretty early in the day, around 10 a.m., and one of them said they just suddenly caught an awful smell on the breeze. One of the guys wanted to just leave well enough alone, saying that it wasn't any of their business. Meanwhile, the other had some kind of sense of duty and followed the smell. Found her body laying in a shallow ditch beside the trail. Cops came and did a joke of a crime scene investigation before declaring it a killing by a jealous lover and packing things in. This woman, poor girl, was gutted. I mean, it looked like something had torn into her hard. Even worse, she had struggle marks, and the worst of it seemed to happen while she was still alive. The damn thing had some nasty claws on it, ripped her belly open from the bottom of her ribcage all the way down to her pelvis. Then, get this. The fucker left everything else intact, but one thing. It ripped her uterus clean from her body. Talking to the coroner, it seemed that this was a pretty common theme with any of the victims that were eventually found out there. Any reproductive organs were always missing, whether it was on a male or female. It seemed to have a preference for females though, usually around the early 20s to early 30s age range. We've come to a conclusion since that this bastard doesn't just hate its mother for giving birth to it, but it hates anything that remotely fits the concept of birth. It hates any kind of new life, seemingly because it never wanted to be born in the first place. Part of our hypothesis that led to this was that besides most of the victims being female, most of the male victims were more circumstantial. Every single one of them had some relation to one of the female victims, usually accompanying them on camping trips or hikes where they managed to stay out too late. It wasn't a pretty thought, but we knew we were going to have to put together a more specialized team to draw this bastard out than our previous hunts. After a couple of days of planning, we had a team. Myself, a couple of Everest's muscle guys named Pietro and Vernon, and 2 women, Claire and Bernadette. Here's the kicker. We had to wait a week before we started the hunt because Claire and Bernadette had to be menstruating to draw out the devil. Yeah, too much information, but when you're hunting down weird shit like this, you kind of just have to go with the flow, if you pardon the very bad joke. We set out early on a Wednesday morning, driving as far into the Pine Barrens as we could, before leaving our van and setting out on foot. Everyone in the group was on high alert, even though the sun was out, so we didn't have much to worry about. By all accounts we had, the devil was a strictly nocturnal creature, so we were safe for the time being. Each of us was equipped with tranquilizer guns, both rifles and pistols, each one holding a special configuration of sedatives created by Avarice Labs' greatest bastards. To be honest, I had never been much of a gun person back before joining up with Avarice, but after the Bigfoot incident, I started hitting a range in whatever town I was in at the time, working on my aim. My grouping wasn't great, but my accuracy was pretty damn on point no matter where I was aiming at. One thing I'll say, I love nature. Always have. Spent all the time I could outdoors as a kid running around in the woods with a couple of friends. I hate the Pine Barrens. Fucking hate them. I can't stress enough how accurate of a name the Pine Barrens is for this damn place. Know what's in the Pine Barrens? Nothing except goddamn pines. The place is literally barren of everything except these tall, scrawny pine trees that block out the sky with thick brush near the top. There are a few ruins all over the place, but they don't do a whole lot when it comes to livening up the place. Even worse, most of what's not pines when it comes to vegetation is just barren nothingness, scrubs here and there without any kind of decent life. The place is a hellhole fitting for a devil. We camped out that night in the middle of the barrens, near some old ruins of a stone building that were crumbling to pieces, everyone sharing one of those big 10-person tents with all of our equipment set up inside. Even put cameras all around the place with live monitors that we could watch from the tent for any hint of movement. The sun went down as we were getting the last one up, and the woods began to almost change around us. The Pine Barrens were already dark thanks to the foliage above, but now, thanks to the cloudy skies above, there wasn't even any moonlight that could come through. It was so dark, I could barely see my hand in front of my face when I stepped out, and we had a rule for the camp that we had to go outside with the buddy system and no less than 2 main flashlights, a gun, and a backup light between each pair. That went double for the women, considering they were basically the bait to draw out the devil here. We set up a small camp stove and made dinner, just canned stew that helped to stave off some of the night chill that was moving in. I was surprised how cold it was out here. But then again, spring was barely here, so it's not too surprising. Almost every noise outside made me jumpy, knowing that the devil could swoop down and tear our tent open at any point if it so chose to. At one point, the screech of an owl about got a good scream out of me, thinking it could be the sounds of the devil himself. The others started making fun of me, but hell, what sane person wouldn't be scared in this kind of situation? 1:15 midnight, nature called. I couldn't help it. Something with the stew we had for dinner just started aggravating my stomach. I didn't have a choice. I had to make the trip outside. I told Pietro, asking if he would come out and stand guard for me while I did the deed. He laughed at me too, saying he thought I already shit my pants when that owl screeched earlier. Despite this, he still agreed to follow me out, and we walked a few dozen yards from the campsite into a pine thicket. Finding a suitable tree in the darkness, I set my light down and started praying to whatever god would hear me. About 2 minutes in, I heard Pietro's radio crackle, Vernon coming over the line to tell us that there was movement on one of the camps nearby. Gotta say, nothing quite speeds up the call of nature like hearing that the devil might be approaching you in the woods. I finished up quick, cleaned myself up, and met back up with Pietro. Turns out, we weren't the ones in danger though, because we immediately heard screams from the tent. We ran back, guns drawn and ready for whatever may be waiting. Half of the left side of the tent was nearly caved in, and there was something struggling inside. I could hear Bernadette screaming bloody murder from within as the tent thrashed back and forth, Claire shouting at Vernon to get whatever it was off of her. Then came a quick succession of shots, as Vernon must have fired off his gun. Shining my light on the tent as we approached, something suddenly crashed out of it. A massive creature probably about 12 feet in height, slender, with the face of a reptile that opened wide with what looked like hundreds of sharp teeth. A long tongue unfurled from the mouth, screeching as massive, scaled wings began to unfold from its back. It was carrying Bernadette under one arm, claws pushing deep into the skin on her abdomen as it tried to get away. When it saw us, it started to flap the wings, taking off into the air while simultaneously pushing off long slender legs that ended in claws like a bird of prey. Well, once we saw it carrying Bernadette, Pietro and I opened fire ourselves. I managed to shoot it straight in the chest with 2 darts, right where the heart should be. Pietro managed a couple of shots, with one landing right in the neck and another punching through the scaly wing, embedding halfway through a membrane. It was about 10 feet off the ground when the flapping of wings began to weaken, eventually stopping completely as it crumpled in a heap below. Once it was down, we rushed over to help Bernadette. Poor girl was in shock, with some gnarly scratches down her abdomen and one big one on her shoulder where the devil had grabbed her. With the threat neutralized, we sent Vernon out to get the truck and radio in for an airlift while the rest of us provided medical help for Bernadette. She was bleeding bad, and the amount of gas we had brought wasn't going to be nearly enough. At some point, we started grabbing jackets, and I eventually offered my shirt to wrap around her, but it wasn't nearly enough. Things looked grim, and God knows how long we had before the sedation wore off on the devil. I finally waved Pietro away, telling him to head over to the devil and start restraining it, something we should have done immediately as soon as it was down, but we were too busy trying to keep Bernadette alive. Big fucking mistake there. The damn thing wasn't completely out, and was starting to overcome the massive amounts of tranquilizer we had put into it. With a screech, it hopped up, swinging an arm at Pietro with long claws extended, catching him right across the neck. Poor bastard bled out almost immediately where it hit him, grasping at his neck with both hands as he went down. I'm not really proud necessarily of what I did next, but I don't think I was in the wrong. Even to this day, I did what was needed to get us the hell out of there and keep this goddamn thing from killing more people. We had brought actual guns with us, not just the tranq ones, but a couple of 12 gauges that were meant for protection if things got too hairy, and I would say this definitely fit the situation. The devil was still overcoming its grogginess, thank fuck, so I told Claire to keep putting pressure on her wounds while I ran into the partially collapsed tent, searching desperately for the shotgun. It took a few minutes, but I finally spotted the stock of it under a collapsed table full of monitors, knocked over by the devil coming in so hot. I quickly lifted the broken table off as well, throwing the monitors onto the ground and shattering a few screens in the process as I scrambled for ammo. A box of shells was put there, pushed down into the canvas bottom of the tent from the pressure on top of it. I quickly scooped it up, dumping some into my hand that I loaded into the gun, and ran back outside. Claire was screaming, holding Bernadette close as the devil was trying to crawl to its feet, dragging itself toward them. Long sharp claws left gouges in the dirt as it got closer, a rasping screech coming from its white mouth, teeth bared. Pietro's body was limp on the ground nearby, blood soaking into the dirt as if the parents themselves were drinking it up greedily. I ran up behind the devil, not hesitating as I put a boot on its back and cocked the gun, leveling the barrel right at its head and pulling the trigger. I did that 6 more times, emptying every shell I had on me into the damn thing. I wasn't taking any more chances, and this thing, it didn't deserve to be kept in conservation. Something about just being in the presence of it felt wrong, and as much as I hate to say it, evil. After seeing what it had done before, I didn't have any qualms about it. I fell back onto the ground after that, still holding tight to the shotgun before running back for more shells to load into it, not willing to even dare let it get back up. Maybe 20 minutes later, the airlift arrived, bringing Bernadette up first, before another came along to take the devil carcass. Bernadette lived, though she's got some nasty scars to this day. We actually ended up dating on and off a little throughout the 80s, if you'd believe that. Didn't work out too well though. She wanted kids. I didn't. It was a whole thing. Still friendly though, and she still would occasionally email me even after I was stationed up here. Has herself a nice little family now. I thought I had killed the devil that night. So imagine my damn surprise when I got up here years later and found out it was still running around its own designated land. According to some of the long-timers here, the cursed bastard was laying there, medically dead, for 3 days, before it suddenly came to life on the exam table, half of its organs out on trays. It killed 5 of the researchers that were studying it and drank them dry of blood. They had to throw in about 24 gas grenades to get it down again before transporting it to the aviary they had originally made for it. A few years later, they basically threw it up here in a little biosphere they made and kind of forgot about it ever since. Apparently, it's able to regenerate from horrific moral wounds over time, even more rapidly if it can feed during the recovery period. Now, it's fucking loose up here, and we have no idea where it is. The son of a bitch broke out of his cage and flew off towards another one of the enclosures at some point last night. Straight up pried the metal panels off the biosphere to get out. And now it's somewhere out here on the rat planet. We're monitoring and have everything on lockdown, as well as we can at the moment anyway. Everyone remaining up here has been issued self-defense weapons, and we're restricting movement to the main HQ building unless on an authorized expedition. Hopefully, we can bring the bastard back in soon. In the meantime, I'm going to try and get some sleep. Sleep didn't come very easy. I keep feeling like something is going to happen. Something bad. The devil is just the start. There are 15 of us up here right now, and that accounts for guards, maintenance, the whole shebang. It used to be a group of 70 that lived here year-round. But when Avarice decided to fuck us all over, they took their elite researchers and most of the upper-level employees out before shutting off teleportation tech from the other side. Bastards. Finding out we were abandoned was a hell of a shock. They basically up and left in the middle of the night, everyone meeting in the room of the portal and stepping through. We only noticed when the main researchers didn't show up for breakfast the next morning and the HQ lead was missing. One of our maintenance guys, Sammy, managed to break into the HQ lead's computer after a few days of trying and found all kinds of email correspondence with Avarice back home. Apparently, the base had become a money sink, so they took the people they thought offered value and abandoned the rest of us. God, if I manage to get back to Earth and find some of these fuckers, they would wish they came up against a Sasquatch instead. Not like they had much to worry about back home. They don't deal with the reality of things up here like we do. All the creatures under our care. Now we're just trapped here, forced to sit and wait as the facilities start to break down around us, bringing about death by dilapidation eventually. Wonder if some humans in the far future will go exploring Mars and find our corpses eventually. Maybe then someone can hold Avarice accountable. Doubt it though. They've gotten away with plenty of other bullshit. Why not this? Considering this nagging feeling of doom I've been having lately, I've been checking in more regularly with one of our more popular residents. Maybe that's why I've been more nostalgic lately too. Looking back on everything, he's certainly the type that makes you look at everything in retrospect and wonder what you could have done differently. He's still sleeping though, and for now, that's a relief. He's one of the few solitary creatures that gets his own little cordoned-off building, mostly because he stays in a sort of cocoon most of the time, lost in some long slumber. It's when he wakes up that we know things are bad. The last time was sometime in the 80s, and that's when we brought him in. Hell, that was nearly 40 years ago now. God, to be that young again. Hell, I would take any youth at this point. I'm pushing into my mid-80s at this point, and God knows I'd not be getting around nearly as well these days if I was back on Earth. The reduced gravity up here is amazing for joint pain, I've gotta say. Despite my age, I'm still pretty spry, but I can feel the years starting to catch up to me. I remember hearing about this guy for years, all the way back to the 60s. Strange sightings of a massive winged creature, glowing red eyes. That was only a couple of months after we brought the Sasquatches in, out in Cali, and this was clear across the country. Not to mention, after everything was said and done, sightings just stopped for the longest time. I think that was the first sign of how unique this guy was, and probably a sign that he should be treated differently from the rest of the creatures we brought in. If you've been anywhere near popular culture in the past 50 years, you probably know who he is. The Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Multiple appearances around a munitions plant in Point Pleasant back in the late 60s. One last appearance on the Silver Bridge, and not long after, that same bridge collapsed during rush hour traffic, killing 46 people and injuring even more. Some of the bodies were never found, and Mothman seemingly disappeared along with them. Until 1987, when new accounts started popping up left and right. Most of them were centered around Point Pleasant again, specifically around the old munitions plant where it had been seen a few times during the last rash of sightings. This operation was one of the more low visibility ones I've ever done. We went in with just a team of 2 of us, myself and a woman named Raquel, a higher ranking agent for Everest. She was a badass in every sense of the word. Like, I've seen few women kick as much ass as her. There was one point when we chased after the Bray Road beast a few years later that she saved my ass, and I've owed her ever since then. There wasn't much kicking ass to be done here though. We went in during the day, getting clearance from some of Everest's government contacts to enter the old munitions plant. They had designated it as a national priority for cleanup years earlier. But from what I heard, that still hasn't happened even today. Could definitely tell at the time that it was in bad shape. Tons of explosives and other chemicals just left around to rot and leak into the surroundings. I'm honestly surprised it hasn't blown up yet. But we might have something to do with avoiding tragedy out there. See, Mothman isn't a harbinger of doom like most think he is. He's actually, according to the researchers that studied him for years, a living glitch in reality. As in, he's not from here. Everything about his biology points to a being that just suddenly poofed into our existence one day, and in doing so, started tearing apart the fabric of space and time around it. They've run tests, and things that stay around it for too long within a 500-foot radius just poof out of existence, or change shape into geometry that, frankly, doesn't make a lick of sense. It's fascinating, but also absolutely brain-breakingly fucking terrifying. From observing him all these years, I don't believe he holds any sort of malice for humanity or anything for that matter either. I believe he's simply trying to find a way to get back to wherever he comes from. But in doing so, he accidentally breaks everything around him. It's tragic in a way. That's why he's in an isolated warehouse away from any of the other conservation areas. But honestly, I don't know if that helps any. Raquel and I went in early that morning and started sweeping the munitions plant, expecting at least a little resistance. At this point, I was so used to almost every procurement mission ending up with a fatality that I was expecting it to be me this time. The munitions plant itself was creepy as hell, almost like an old haunted house, dilapidated and falling apart around every corner, bugs all over the place. And at one point, I opened the door to just have a dozen or so bats fly out into my face. So cue my surprise when we made it to the storage basement and found Mothman asleep, standing upright, staring into a corner like nothing else was happening. It was a lot easier than I expected. We just called in for backup and they came, threw a massive net over him before he woke up and carted him off into the back of a huge van. Said they kept him in the basement of Conservation HQ for a while before they realized how he was able to warp reality. Apparently the hinges on his containment doors kept disappearing, and at one point the doors themselves became a blank wall. I was just grateful we had a procurement mission without any kind of bloodshed. Eventually, they moved him up here, deciding he was better off away from literally anything that he could cause indirect harm to. They were right, of course, but I can't lie. I felt bad for him. It must get lonely with nobody able to be around you thanks to powers beyond your control. Now he stays up here, asleep in this massive silken cocoon he's made for himself in a locked room that the doors have long disappeared from. He doesn't eat, doesn't go to the bathroom, nothing that's needed for regular creatures to survive. We've speculated he might be an alien, but, well, we don't know, to be honest. Either way, we're keeping a close eye on him. When he wakes up, well, we know it's probably time for shit to hit the fan for us. I pray it doesn't happen, for his sake and ours. I'm tired today. Things have been rougher than usual on the old bones, So I think I'm going to take whatever extra time I have and just nap. Get some good rest. Oh boy, we got an angry one last night. Another one of the inmates tried to break containment. And this one is a mean son of a bitch. He about took the arm off one of the guards down in the cells below the main HQ and managed to claw through the bulletproof glass in his room. Thankfully, there were steel bars to keep him on the other side. But that was a little too close for comfort. Now I'll say, I'm usually a dog person. I had a good mutt growing up named Apollo that was one of the best damn dogs to ever live. Smart as a whip, loyal, and would always be up for going out on little nature excursions with me. This thing we have in containment now, it's the only kind of dog I think I've ever had the misfortune of meeting. Out in Wisconsin in the late early 90s, there started some swirling rumors about a beast near a little place called Bray Road. This thing was said to look like a massive wolf man, something out of an old Universal monster movie, but with 10 times the anger behind him. He was a mean old son of a bitch, that's for damn sure, known to chase cars and other travelers at night, swipe at any he could get close enough to, and run out into the road, causing some people to swerve off into the ditch. Though publicly he didn't have any victims, avarice had word from local authorities about quite a few people missing. Cars found abandoned near Bray Road. Some looked like they had willingly gotten out. Usually they had a little damage to the front bumper, like they had hit something, and probably gotten out to check on whatever they had made contact with. Others looked like the top of the car had been clawed open, something trying to get to the passengers inside, like they were canned meat ready to be devoured. Blood was usually splattered all over the car interior, but otherwise, no body could ever be found for half of these people. It was 1993, I think. I lose track of some of the later acquisitions, to be honest. I was part of a decently sized group sent out to find this damn thing. All we knew was that it appeared along Bray Road, and survivor accounts said it was probably around 7 feet tall, furry, and a vicious temper. We took 2 surveillance vans full of equipment, one for monitoring and another full of stuff that we might need to capture the damn thing. Throughout the day, we set up traps along the side of the road. Pits, nets, bear traps, you name it. I know we started out this entire journey trying to be as humane as possible when it came to capturing these cryptids, but at some point, we learned that the more dangerous ones were a kill or be killed situation, so we started packing to meet that challenge. By the time the sun went down the first night, we were ready for anything that may come our way. I was in the surveillance van, watching monitors on the various trail cameras we had set up all over a 4-mile radius from the center point on Bray Road, where most of the abandoned cars had been found in the past couple of years. At this point, I was honestly just happy not to be one of the ones out in the shit, hunting the damn thing. Especially after all I had seen with the Sasquatch, devil, and numerous other creatures I had gone after in the past 25 years or so. This was a nice change of pace, and I got some nice air conditioning and a pot of fresh coffee to boot. Unfortunately, the first night was pretty much a bust. Even with all the monitors and equipment we had set up, all we managed to find were a couple of rabbits that got curious and sniffed around one of the cameras. No sign of prey anywhere. All of us went back to the hotel during the day, doing what we could to get some rest before going back on our all-night surveillance bender again. I had hoped we would catch it the next night, not realizing just how much we were in for the long haul with this damn creature. Raquel joined me in the van the next night. Catching up with her was a trip, getting to exchange stories about what we had been up to in the years since tracking the Mothman. Finding out more about what avarice was, that's where the first seeds of doubt started to plant in my mind. A few drinks later that week, she spilled to me that the company wasn't all it was cracked up to be as some shining beacon of morality. They were after their own goals and would let anyone that got in their way die to achieve them. The Mars Conservation Initiative was well underway at this point, and by all accounts, we thought that they were going to be sending the creatures up in specialized cargo rockets, just like we were sending people to the moon or the International Space Station. Instead, she told me about the teleportation tech they were working on and exactly who was helping them with it. Apparently, Avarice was making use of dozens if not hundreds of former Nazi scientists, some of the worst, and giving them cushy lives while they were at it. At the time, I kind of just wrote it off. I mean, who cared if they had Nazis doing some crazy science for them after all? Wasn't affecting me, and avarice was supposedly doing it for the good of all humanity, right? Yeah, I've changed my mind since then, especially after the bastards used that same Nazi science to abandon us up here with no means of escape. Our conversation that night though was interrupted not long after 1 in the morning. We spotted movement on one of the cameras, and believing that it was simply another rabbit, I ignored it at first. Until it took the camera out. We dared not send one of our men out to check on it for fear of what may be waiting out there. After a few moments though, another of the cameras picked something up, and this time we got a full view. Lurching into view on 4 legs, eyes shining in the infrared camera light, was a wolf-like creature, much bigger than any wolf I had ever seen. The fur was shaggy, matted to its body. The body itself looked emaciated, scrawny, like it was going to break apart just by the slightest of movements. There seemed to be chunks of fur missing in places, and the ears were torn and gnarled. When it looked at the camera though, it was like it knew we were watching it. It bared its teeth in a grin, smiling almost ear to ear with massive fangs that could easily rip through a human in one bite if it so chose. We radioed in immediately to the hunting party, letting them know to be on alert as it swiped a massive paw at this camera, knocking it out just like it had the other one. The hunting party set out to try and track it, and we could see them moving in towards the area it had been last spotted. They searched for some time, but despite finding tracks and following them for almost 3 miles, there was no sign of the beast. It just disappeared, gone into the night, as if it had never been there. The next 4 nights were much the same. We would catch the occasional sight of prey on the cameras, running by or scoping out the traps that we had set. And despite when we would call the hunting party to go after it, the trail almost always went cold when they hit the end of Bray Road. It was like he was disappearing into thin air, gone with the night no matter how close our guys got. It managed to evade all our traps almost perfectly, despite setting up new ones throughout the week to cover an even wider area. It would leap over the camouflaged pits we set up, set off the bear traps without ever stepping foot within them, and in general find a way to avoid everything. This bastard was smart and wasn't going to be taken in without a fight. After nearly a week, we realized that this just wasn't going to work, so Raquel and I formulated a plan of our own. The massive amount of people out here were likely what was driving it away, so we would try something different. We got 2 rental cars. The first would be driven solo by me, and I would go along the road back and forth throughout the night in intervals. The second would follow me, about 20 minutes behind, so that the beast wouldn't know if there was someone else coming its way. Sure, I was voluntarily offering myself up as bait. But, well, after all this time, it's just what was necessary, I felt. I made the back and forth trip at least 4 times before anything happened. On the 5th go around though, after about 5 minutes on that lonely stretch of road, my brights on so I could spot anything in the darkness of the trees lining the road. I saw it. It came landing out of the woods, slowly on all 4 legs. It was much bigger seeing it in real life and not through a camera, though it seemed even more skinny, to the point where ribs were showing through the long torso as it stood on 2 legs, once reaching the middle of the road. I kept going, hitting the gas a little bit to put on speed. I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew if I stopped outright, then it was going to tear me to pieces in seconds. I would either plow through it, or it would move. No in between. As I approached, it suddenly disappeared for a moment, and I thought it had dove into the woods again before a loud thump on the top of my car told me otherwise. I saw a dent form in the roof, something hitting repeatedly, before long claws started to screech against metal, rending through and allowing moonlight to come pouring in through the cracks. A terrible smell filled my nostrils, like a corpse left out in the hot sun for days to rot. Then suddenly, a massive arm was reaching through the hole, trying to grab for me as I swerved, trying to keep myself clear of it while also staying on the road. It pulled its arms out, instead clawing at the roof once again to try and tear it open, making an even bigger hole this time that it then stuck its head through. The jaws snapped at me, the smell of death filling the entire car as I desperately tried not to puke while attempting to maintain my driving. Before long, it was impossible to keep my speed and stay on the road, so I quickly hit my brakes, hoping to throw it off. It worked, and I briefly saw the beast fly over the hood before landing on the paved road ahead, bouncing on the concrete and leaving a bloody trail before it stood again. One leg was twisted around backwards, but it simply grabbed at it, twisting it back with a sickening crack that I could hear from nearly 20 feet away. Thinking fast, I hit reverse, trying to execute a turn and lead it back towards the other car for backup. It jumped at me again, crashing through the windshield this time and grabbing for me while snapping massive jaws, saliva flying everywhere like a rabid animal. I felt one claw rend the flesh on my shoulder, drawing hot blood that quickly soaked my shirt and left me in a searing pain. Backing up the car was doing nothing, and the beast was firmly lodged into the windshield now with no way of getting out. So I did the next logical thing. I got out and started running, briefly grabbing the pistol from my passenger seat before I took off. The beast took a moment to free itself from the frame of the windshield, but when it did, the slight head start I had wasn't nearly enough. It was after me, all four paws thumping on the pavement as it gave chase. I fired off a couple of rounds, one hitting it in the shoulder, but not making it stop. The beast leapt, falling right on top of me and sending the gun flying into a ditch alongside the road. I felt my life start flashing before my eyes at that point. As it was bearing down on me, the moon shining full in the sky above, it bared its teeth, saliva dripping down into my face and making me gag from the smell. Its breath was even worse than the smell that it was already giving off, hot and dank with the scent of blood and decomposing flesh. Whatever this thing was, whatever it came from, all it was designed to do was kill, and I quickly realized that those missing people probably had this same experience before it devoured them on this very road. The beast reared up, letting a howl loose to the sky, then started to make its final move. Jaws open wide, it quickly threw its head down towards my neck, ready to rip my throat out with one solid bite. Before gunshots popped from a few feet away, a bullet hit the damn thing square between the eyes, causing the howls and growls to abruptly stop as it slumped over limp on top of me. Raquel was standing a few feet away, rifle to her shoulder and aiming down the sights as another agent stepped from the car, running in to help me get out from under the beast. I had never been so damn happy to see another person, I think. I bought her drinks for the next 2 days. After getting the restraints and a muzzle on the beast, it started to stir again, the bullet slowly squeezing through from where it had embedded in its head. It's like, well, the damn thing was healing like it was fucking Wolverine or something. At this point, I've stopped believing that any of these creatures are a natural part of the world and fully realize they've got something otherworldly going on. But it's still a hell of a shock when they do something like this, you know. That was my last procurement mission. I spent the next few years working on the conservation project, planning things up here and getting a more hands-on role with the future Mars Conservatory for Unnatural Creatures. Eventually, right at the turn of the millennia, I stepped through one of the teleporters and came up here as a full-time handler and guard for the creatures. It was nice for a time too. Nothing too crazy, just like working at a zoo for supernatural animals. Then things went to hell. I'm going to step away for a bit. We're doing more sweeps for the devil since he still hasn't been seen after escaping a couple of days ago. God, I hope we find him soon. Makes me nervous having something that devious out there running around, especially knowing that it has the smarts to plot our downfall. I floated the idea of launching it into the void of space to Avarice some time ago, but they told me no on the grounds of, it's a creature that deserves life, no matter where that may be. Talk about being hypocritical bastards.